Jake Morrison stared at the screens on his ship's bridge. The numbers made no sense. 12 massive objects were moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. Each one was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The UES Liberty, his exploration ship, was the farthest human vessel from home when the sensors picked up the alien fleet. "Captain, you need to see this," said his communications officer, Pete Davis. The young man's hands shook as he worked the controls. "I'm getting signals from these ships. They're trying to talk to us." Jake walked over to Pete's station. The screens showed wave patterns unlike anything they had seen before. But their computers were working hard to make sense of the signals. After 20 minutes, words began to appear on the screen. "Greetings, small vessel," the message read. "You will direct us to your home world. We bring the gift of civilization to your species." Jake felt his stomach drop. This was first contact with aliens, something humans had dreamed about for centuries. But something about the message felt wrong. The words were polite, but they sounded like orders, not requests. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter was having the worst day of her career. She sat in the command center deep under the Colorado mountains, watching reports flood in from every space station and colony. The alien fleet was huge, and it wasn't slowing down. "Ma'am, we're getting a direct transmission," said Lieutenant Bob Hayes. "It's coming from the biggest ship in their fleet." Lisa straightened her uniform and nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared made everyone in the room step back. The alien was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. Its face was hard to read, but its voice was clear and cold. "I am Harold Vex of the Galactic Empire," it said. "We have come to bring your world into our great civilization. You should feel honored. Very few species receive this opportunity." Lisa found her voice. "I am Admiral Carter of Earth Space Command. We welcome peaceful contact with your people." The alien's expression didn't change. "Peace is what we offer. Your world will join the Empire. Your military will surrender their weapons. Your people will take their proper place in our society. You have 30 of your days to prepare for integration." "Integration?" Lisa asked. "What does that mean exactly?" "Your species will be evaluated and assigned roles based on your capabilities," Vex replied. "Most will serve in our mining operations or manufacturing centers. Some may qualify for more advanced positions. All will benefit from the order and stability the Empire provides." Lisa's blood ran cold. This wasn't first contact. This was a conquest disguised as an invitation. "And if we refuse?" Vex tilted his head slightly. "Refusal is not an option that exists. In 5,000 years, no species has chosen to refuse the Empire's gift. The process always proceeds smoothly once the benefits are explained." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Lisa looked around at her staff. Every face showed the same mix of fear and anger she felt. Meanwhile, at the listening post on Europa, Captain Steve Barnes had been busy for weeks. His job was to monitor space for any unusual signals, but what he found was beyond anything in his training. The alien ships had been talking to each other long before they contacted Earth, and Steve had been recording everything. "Dr. Rodriguez, you need to hear this," Steve called to the base's language expert. Amy Rodriguez was the smartest person Steve knew when it came to understanding how different beings communicated. Amy sat down at Steve's workstation and put on the headphones. For hours, she listened to the alien conversations, making notes and running the sounds through every analysis program they had. "Steve, this is bad," she said finally. "These aren't explorers or diplomats. They're discussing Earth like it's already conquered. They're talking about how to break our spirit and make us compliant." "What do you mean?" Steve asked. Amy pulled up her notes on the screen. "They've done this before, many times. They study a species first, learn their strengths and weaknesses, then design the conquest to crush their will to resist. They're already planning how to handle what they call the human problem." Steve felt sick. "What kind of problem?" "They think we're too unpredictable. Most species they conquer follow clear patterns, but their analysis of our broadcasts and communications confuses them. They can't figure out how we'll react to their demands. So what's their plan? Amy's face was grim. They're going to demonstrate their power by predicting and stopping every move we make. They want to prove that even our chaos can be controlled. It's psychological warfare designed to break our spirit completely. At the same time, Lieutenant Colonel Ben Taylor was reading reports that made his military training feel useless. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds. Their tactics were always the same, and they always worked. They would identify what a species was most proud of, then crush it completely. "Sir, look at this," said Sergeant Lisa Moore, handing Ben a translated document. "This is their analysis of human military capability." Ben read the report and wanted to throw it across the room. The Empire had studied every human conflict for the past century. They knew every strategy, every weapon, every tactical doctrine Earth's military had ever used. Worse, they had already planned counters for everything humans might try. "They're not just ahead of us technologically," Ben told his staff. "They've turned war into a science. They know exactly how we'll fight, and they've already won those battles on paper." The Empire's advance fleet took position around Earth's solar system. Their ships were so large they blocked out stars. Each vessel carried enough firepower to destroy continents, and their shields could stop anything Earth's weapons could deliver. But the Empire had made one mistake in all their planning. They assumed that knowing how humans had fought in the past meant they knew how humans would fight in the future. They believed their simulations and models could predict every human action. Harold Vex stood on his flagship's bridge, watching Earth's blue surface on his screens. Soon, this world would join the thousands of others under Empire control. The humans would resist at first, as they always did, but the process would follow the same pattern it always followed. What Vex didn't know was that Captain Steve Barnes, Dr. Amy Rodriguez, Lieutenant Colonel Ben Taylor, and Admiral Lisa Carter were already sharing information. Earth's leaders were beginning to understand something the Empire never considered possible. Sometimes the best way to win a war isn't to fight it at all. General Frank Sullivan walked through the underground tunnels of NORAD, his boots echoing in the silence. Every step felt heavy as he carried the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. The War Council meeting was about to begin, and everyone knew the odds were hopeless. The conference room filled with Earth's top military leaders and scientists. Admiral Lisa Carter sat at one end of the long table, her face showing the stress of sleepless nights. Colonel Rita Hayes spread papers across the table, each one showing calculations that painted the same grim picture. "Let me give you the numbers," Rita said, her voice steady despite the terrible news she was about to share. The Empire has 12 ships in their advance fleet. Each ship is 3 miles long and carries enough weapons to destroy entire cities. Our entire space fleet has 37 ships, and most of them are cargo vessels with guns bolted on. General Sullivan nodded grimly. "What about our ground forces?" "It won't matter," Rita continued. "In a direct fight, we calculate human resistance would last 4 hours and 23 minutes. That includes time for their ships to travel between targets." The room fell silent. Everyone had known it was bad, but hearing the exact numbers made it real. Dr. Karen White, who studied how to break enemy morale, spoke up first. "Their technology is thousands of years ahead of ours," she said, "but I've been studying their communications patterns. They have a weakness we might be able to use." "What kind of weakness?" asked Admiral Carter. Karen pulled out a thick folder. "They're predictable. Everything they do follows the same pattern. They study a species, make plans based on that study, then execute those plans exactly as written. They never change course even when things don't go as expected." Captain Drew Phillips had been quiet until now. He was a former Special Forces soldier who had spent his career thinking about impossible missions. "What if we don't try to win the war?" he said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. General Sullivan raised an eyebrow. "Explain that, Captain." "They expect us to fight and lose," Drew said, standing up and walking to the wall display. "Every species they've conquered tried to win a military victory and failed. But what if we had a different goal?" "Such as?" asked Dr. White. Drew pointed to the intelligence reports about the Empire. "They rule through fear. Every species in their empire believes resistance is impossible because no one has ever successfully fought them. But what if we made them look weak? What if we made their conquest of Earth cost them more than they gained? Colonel Rita Hayes shook her head. Even if we embarrass them, they'll still destroy us. Maybe, Drew replied. But what happens to their empire when other species see that humans made them struggle? What happens when their subjects realize the empire isn't invincible? Dr. Karen White's eyes widened as she understood what Drew was suggesting. You're talking about psychological warfare on a galactic scale, not against the empire directly, but against their reputation. Admiral Carter leaned forward. Keep talking. Drew walked back to his seat, his mind racing with possibilities. Their whole power structure depends on other species believing they can't be beaten. If even one species makes them look foolish or weak, it could inspire rebellions across their entire territory. General Sullivan was beginning to see the plan take shape. So instead of trying to defeat their military, we focus on defeating their image of invincibility. Exactly, said Drew, and I think I know how to do it. Dr. White opened her files on empire psychology. I've been analyzing their command structure. Their leaders are chosen for following rules and procedures perfectly. They literally cannot think outside their established patterns. If we can make them react in ways that look weak or confused, their own people will start questioning their competence. Major Sam Brooks had been studying the technical aspects of the Empire's communications. There's something else, he said. They're broadcasting this conquest live to dozens of their subject worlds. It's meant to be a demonstration of their power, showing other species what happens when the Empire comes calling. The room went quiet as everyone realized what this meant. Admiral Carter spoke first. They're giving us an audience. Billions of beings across the galaxy will be watching Earth's conquest, Sam continued. Most of these species have been enslaved for centuries. They'll be watching to see if we fight, how we lose, and what happens to us afterward. Drew smiled for the first time in days. So we give them a show they'll never forget. Dr. White was already making notes. If we can communicate with these other species during our conquest, we could do more than inspire them. We could give them information they need to fight back. What kind of information? Asked General Sullivan. Empire military codes, ship designs, tactical procedures, supply routes, Karen replied. Everything we learn about them while they're conquering us. Colonel Hayes looked up from her calculations. This is insane. You're talking about turning our defeat into their strategic disaster. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Drew said. They expect us to fight desperately and lose quickly. Instead, we fight smartly and lose slowly, gathering intelligence the whole time. Then we broadcast that intelligence to every oppressed species in the galaxy. Admiral Carter was beginning to see the full scope of the plan. We're not trying to save Earth. We're trying to save the galaxy. Earth might be doomed, Drew agreed, but we can make sure the Empire pays a price that will haunt them for generations. Major Brooks pulled up star charts showing Empire territory. I've been monitoring their communications network. If we can tap into their broadcast system, we could reach resistance movements on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. Dr. White added, her psychological analysis. The Empire's greatest fear isn't military defeat. It's losing control of their subjects. If dozens of worlds rebel at once, they won't have enough ships to put down all the uprisings. General Sullivan looked around the room at his officers and advisors. So we're really considering this? Sacrificing Earth to start a galactic revolution? Not sacrificing, Drew corrected. Investing. Earth's freedom might be the price we pay to free the galaxy. The plan was audacious beyond anything ever attempted in human history. Instead of trying to win an impossible war, they would turn their defeat into a weapon that could destroy an empire that had ruled for thousands of years. As the meeting broke up, everyone knew they were about to attempt something that would either be remembered as humanity's greatest moment or its final act of defiance. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Paul Green stood in the war room, looking at plans that would have seemed impossible just days ago. Every military base on Earth was working together on the strangest mission in human history. They weren't preparing to win a war. They were preparing to lose one in exactly the right way. The fake installations are almost ready, reported Commander Alex Johnson. His team had been working around the clock to build military bases that looked real from space but were actually broadcasting stations. Each fake base was designed to make the Empire think humans were preparing for a conventional war. Dr. Helen Davis walked over to the holographic display showing Earth's orbital defenses. "The Empire will scan every weapon we have," she explained to the assembled officers. "They need to see exactly what they expect to see or they'll become suspicious." The key to the entire plan was making the Empire feel overconfident. If they suspected humans were planning something unusual, they might change their own tactics. Every piece of equipment, every troop movement, and every communication had to fit the pattern the Empire expected from a desperate species preparing for hopeless. Resistance engineer Kate Murphy was working on the most critical part of the deception. She stood in a laboratory surrounded by devices that looked like powerful weapons but were actually sophisticated communication equipment. "These pulse cannons will register as plasma weapons on their sensors," she explained to physicist Dr. Ryan Clark. "But they're really quantum transmitters. When we fire them at the Empire ships, we'll actually be uploading data packets into their communication network." Dr. Clark studied the device carefully. "The Empire will think we're trying to damage their ships with primitive weapons. They won't realize we're giving them a computer virus designed to improve their broadcast quality." "Exactly," Kate smiled. "They'll be so busy laughing at our pathetic weapons that they won't notice we're hacking their entire fleet." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Nancy Webb was deep in psychological analysis of the Empire's command structure. She had studied every conversation humans had recorded with Empire officers, looking for patterns in how they thought and made decisions. "They select their commanders for rigid thinking," she reported to Captain Gary Foster. "An Empire officer who shows creativity or independent thought is considered dangerous and unreliable. Their entire promotion system rewards people who follow orders exactly without questioning them." Gary nodded as he reviewed Nancy's files. "So if we do something they don't expect, they won't know how to respond?" "Worse than that," Nancy replied. "They'll assume we're following some plan they just don't understand yet. They'll keep waiting for us to do what their computers predict we'll do, even when we're obviously doing something completely different." This psychological blindness was the foundation of humanity's strategy. The Empire's commanders were so used to predictable enemies that they couldn't recognize an unpredictable one. Dr. Julia Adams was working on the most delicate part of the entire operation. She sat in a soundproof room, writing the speech that would change galactic history. The words had to work on multiple levels simultaneously. "It has to sound like a surrender to Empire ears," she explained to Captain Gary Foster. "But resistance fighters listening on other worlds need to understand it's actually a battle cry." Gary read over her latest draft. "How do you make the same words mean opposite things to different listeners?" "Context and code phrases," Julia replied. "The Empire expects conquered species to praise their generosity and wisdom. But those same phrases have different meanings in the languages of oppressed worlds. When I say the Empire brings order and stability, rebels will hear oppression and death." The speech would be broadcast across the galaxy during Earth's surrender ceremony. To the Empire, it would confirm their superiority and humanity's acceptance of defeat. To resistance movements, it would be a detailed intelligence briefing disguised as propaganda. Colonel Emma Thompson was coordinating the technical aspects of the Galactic broadcast. She worked with communications specialist Tony Roberts to ensure the message would reach every corner of Empire space. "We need the signal to bounce off their own satellites," Tony explained as he worked on frequency calculations. "If we use our own transmitters, they'll shut us down immediately. But if we piggyback on their network, they'll actually help us spread the message." Emma watched the technicians install hidden transmitters throughout Earth's cities. "The Empire thinks they're jamming our communications. They don't realize they're actually amplifying them." Every resistance cell in the galaxy used slightly different communication frequencies to avoid Empire detection. Tony's team had identified hundreds of these frequencies and programmed them into Earth's surrender broadcast. When the signal went out, it would automatically split into dozens of different transmissions, each one reaching a different group of rebels. Captain Joe Rogers was preparing for what everyone knew would be a suicide mission. His ship, the UES Defiance, was being loaded with the most sophisticated computer virus ever created. The mission was simple in concept, but deadly in execution. "I need to get close enough to their flagship to establish a direct data link," Joe explained to his crew. "The virus has to be uploaded directly into their main computer system." His pilot, Sarah Kim, studied the attack plan. "We won't survive this mission, will we, Captain?" Joe looked at his young crew members. "No, we won't. But the virus will. And it will make sure every word of Earth's surrender speech reaches every oppressed world in the galaxy. The virus wasn't designed to damage Empire systems. Instead, it would secretly copy itself into every communication relay in their network. When Earth's surrender was broadcast, the virus would ensure perfect signal quality and maximum distribution to resistance frequencies." Dr. Mary Collins was rehearsing her role as Earth's chief negotiator. She would be the one to deliver humanity's surrender directly to the Empire commander. And every word had to be perfect. "I have to sound defeated but dignified," she practiced with Dr. Adams. "The Empire needs to believe they've broken our spirit without destroying our usefulness as slaves." But hidden in Mary's surrender speech would be detailed technical specifications of every Empire weakness humans had discovered. Shield frequencies, weapon power cycles, ship design flaws, and command protocols would all be embedded in her words of defeat. As the Empire fleet moved into position around Earth, humanity's greatest deception was nearly ready. They had built fake defenses to hide real transmitters, created false weapons to conceal communication devices, and written surrender speeches that were actually battle plans. The Empire expected to conquer another primitive world and add it to their collection of trophies. Instead, they were about to give humanity the greatest stage in galactic history to deliver a message that would shatter their empire from within. Earth's only warning was almost ready to be sent. The Empire's main fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly where their computers said they would. 12 massive ships took positions around Earth, their dark hulls blocking out the light from distant stars. Harold Vex stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the primitive blue world that would soon join the Empire's collection. "Begin standard conquest protocol," Vex ordered his officers. "Monitor all human communications and defensive preparations. I want to see how closely they match our predictions." On Earth, the performance of a lifetime was about to begin. Admiral Linda Martinez stood in what appeared to be humanity's primary command center, but was actually a sophisticated movie set built inside a hollowed-out mountain. The real command center was hidden miles away, where she could coordinate the deception without being detected. "All units begin defensive operations," Linda announced over open communications that she knew the Empire was monitoring. "Protect the orbital stations at all costs." The human fleet moved exactly as the Empire's computers had predicted. Ships took defensive positions around Earth's moon and space stations, forming battle lines that looked brave but were actually hopeless. Every movement followed patterns the Empire had seen from dozens of other conquered species. Captain Joe Rogers sat in the pilot seat of the UES Defiance, watching the Empire flagship grow larger on his screen. His mission was the most important, part of the entire plan, and everyone knew he wouldn't survive it. "Beginning attack run on the enemy flagship," Joe transmitted on all frequencies. "This is for Earth." His ship accelerated toward the massive Empire vessel, weapons firing in what looked like a desperate suicide attack. The Empire's defensive systems tracked his approach with casual efficiency. They had seen this exact scenario hundreds of times before. But hidden in the Defiance's weapon systems was the most sophisticated computer virus ever created. As Joe's ship fired its final shots before being destroyed, the virus uploaded itself into the Empire's communication network through their own defensive systems. Harold Vex watched the human ship explode against his shields without interest. "Predictable," he said to his communications officer. "How many more ships will attempt similar attacks?" "Based on human psychological profiles, approximately 7 more suicide runs are expected," the officer replied. "All will fail with similar results." What Vex didn't know was that the virus was already spreading through his fleet's computers, quietly improving broadcast quality and ensuring perfect signal distribution to frequencies used by resistance movements across the galaxy. Dr. Mary Collins walked into the surrender ceremony wearing her best diplomatic uniform. She carried herself with the defeated dignity the Empire expected from conquered leaders, but her words would carry a very different message to those who knew how to listen. The ceremony was being broadcast live to hundreds of worlds across Empire, space. On each of these worlds, beings who had been enslaved for generations watched to see how the latest species would fall to the Empire's might. "People of Earth," Mary began, her voice carrying across the galaxy through the Empire's own communication network. "We have fought bravely, but we must now accept the wisdom of the Galactic Empire." To Empire ears, her words sounded like proper submission. But hidden in her speech were technical specifications for Empire shield generators, weapon frequencies, and tactical weaknesses. Resistance fighters throughout the galaxy heard detailed instructions for attacking the ships that had oppressed them for centuries. "The Empire brings order to chaos," Mary continued, "stability to uncertainty, and purpose to the purposeless." On the world of Kepler Prime, rebel leader Zara listened to the broadcast with growing excitement. Order to chaos was an old rebel code phrase meaning, attack coordinates follow. The human wasn't surrendering. She was giving them targeting data. On the mining world of Vega 7, Resistance Commander Thane heard stability to uncertainty and knew it meant supply route vulnerabilities included. The humans were sharing intelligence about Empire logistics networks. Harold Vex watched the surrender ceremony with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The human leader was praising the Empire's generosity and wisdom, just as every other conquered species had done. "Their psychological conditioning is complete," he reported to Empire High Command. "The humans have accepted their place in the natural order. Integration can begin immediately." But across the galaxy, something unprecedented was happening. Captain Laura Wilson, hidden in Earth's real command center, watched communication intercepts from dozens of worlds. Resistance groups that had been quiet for decades were suddenly active. "Admiral Martinez, you need to see this," Laura called out. "We're getting responses from rebel cells on 17 different worlds. They're confirming receipt of the technical data." Linda smiled as she watched the reports flood in. The virus had worked perfectly. Earth's surrender broadcast had reached every corner of Empire space, carrying detailed information about Empire weaknesses disguised as praise for their strength. On the industrial world of Rigel 4, factory workers who had been secretly building weapons for decades suddenly had detailed specifications for Empire ship vulnerabilities. The targeting data hidden in Mary's speech gave them exactly what they needed to make their improvised weapons effective. On the agricultural world of Centauri 9, farmers who had been planning rebellion for generations received precise information about Empire patrol schedules and supply convoys. The logistics data embedded in the surrender ceremony told them exactly when and where to strike. Dr. Chris Baker monitored the quantum communication devices that had been secretly embedded in the Empire's own broadcasting network. The surrender ceremony had been transmitted simultaneously to hundreds of worlds, but each transmission carried slightly different information, tailored to the specific needs of local resistance movements. "The data transfer is complete," Chris reported. "Every major resistance cell in Empire space now has detailed intelligence on ship designs, weapon frequencies, command codes, and tactical procedures." Harold Vex was still congratulating himself on another successful conquest when his communications officer looked up with confusion. "Sir, we're receiving reports of unusual activity on several worlds." "What kind of activity?" Vex asked. "Mechanical failures in orbital platforms around Kepler Prime, equipment malfunctions in the Vega 7 mining operation, communication disruptions on Rigel 4. Vex frowned. Mechanical failures were common, but simultaneous problems on multiple worlds was unusual. "Investigate these incidents, report back within the hour." What Vex didn't realize was that there were no mechanical failures. Resistance fighters were using the technical data from Earth's surrender to launch precisely coordinated attacks on Empire infrastructure. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's subjects were fighting back with the knowledge they needed to actually hurt their oppressors. Captain Laura Wilson watched the reports stream in from across the galaxy. The plan was working better than anyone had dared hope. Earth's surrender had been the signal for a galactic uprising, and the Empire had no idea what was coming. The performance was nearly complete, but the real show was just beginning. Harold Vex stood on his flagship bridge reading reports that made no sense. The mechanical failures his officers had mentioned were spreading. What started as minor problems on 3 worlds had become major uprisings on 17 different planets. "Sir, the Kepler Prime orbital station has been destroyed," reported his tactical officer. "Initial reports blamed equipment failure, but we're now detecting coordinated rebel activity." Vex's forearms tensed with anger. "Rebels? On Kepler Prime? That world has been peaceful for 200 years. "Yes, sir, but they're using advanced tactics. They knew exactly where to hit our shield generators and weapon systems. Someone gave them detailed technical specifications of our equipment." On Earth, General Peter Hughes watched the chaos unfold from the hidden command center. Multiple screens showed Empire worlds erupting in rebellion simultaneously. The intelligence data hidden in Mary's surrender speech was being put to devastating use. "Vega 7 mining operations have been completely shut down," reported Lieutenant Kim Park. "The rebels hit every critical system with surgical precision. They knew exactly which components to target." Admiral Linda Martinez smiled as she watched the galactic uprising spread. "How many worlds are now in active rebellion?" 23. "And counting," Peter replied. "And these aren't random attacks. Every rebel group is using the same technical data we provided. They're hitting Empire forces with tactics that should be impossible for primitive species to know. The rebellions weren't random acts of desperation. They were coordinated strikes by beings who suddenly possessed detailed knowledge of Empire weaknesses. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were fighting with the tactical sophistication of Empire officers. Dr. Ann Scott had been monitoring Empire communications since the surrender ceremony. Her linguistic analysis was proving correct. The Empire's rigid command structure couldn't adapt to unexpected situations. "Listen to this," Ann said, playing a recorded conversation between Empire commanders. "They keep talking about impossible coincidences and statistical anomalies. They literally cannot accept that the rebellions are connected to Earth's conquest." Captain Dan Kelly walked over to Ann's workstation. "What do you mean?" "Their commanders are selected for following procedures exactly," Ann explained. "When something happens that doesn't fit their procedures, they assume it's a mistake or coincidence. They can't conceive that a conquered species might be more dangerous than an unconquered one." Harold Vex was experiencing this psychological blindness firsthand. His fleet had been sent to other systems to help crush the rebellions, but everywhere they went, the rebels seemed to know exactly how Empire ships operated. "How are they targeting our weapon systems so precisely?" Vex demanded of his engineering officer. "These species shouldn't even understand our technology." "Unknown, sir," the officer replied nervously. "But they're using information that only Empire personnel should possess. Shield frequencies, power cycle timings, structural weak points. Someone is giving them our most classified technical data." What Vex still didn't understand was that Earth had given that information to every resistance movement in the galaxy. The surrender ceremony had been a galactic intelligence transfer disguised as a defeat. Colonel Susan Price was coordinating the final phase of humanity's plan from Earth. Every human prisoner being shipped to Empire worlds was actually a trained intelligence operative. Every piece of Earth technology being integrated into Empire systems contained hidden programming. "The sleeper agents are activating across the galaxy," Susan reported to Admiral Martinez. "Our people have been placed in key positions on dozens of worlds. They're providing real-time intelligence to rebel forces and sabotaging Empire operations from within." Linda nodded with satisfaction. "And the technology transfers?" "Every computer system, communication device, and piece of equipment we've given them has built-in backdoors," Susan replied. "We can access Empire networks, monitor their communications, and disable their systems whenever we choose." The Empire had thought they were integrating valuable human resources into their civilization. Instead, they had given Earth's agents access to their most sensitive installations and critical infrastructure. Captain Jake Morrison, still aboard the UES Liberty in deep space, was monitoring Empire communications when he heard Harold Vex's voice break with frustration. "This is impossible," Vex was saying to his fleet commanders. 47 worlds are now in rebellion. Our supply lines are being attacked with impossible precision. Our patrol routes are being ambushed as if the rebels know our schedules in advance. Jake smiled as he listened to the Empire's confusion. They knew their schedules in advance because Earth had given that information to every resistance cell in the galaxy. Dr. Mary Collins, who had delivered the surrender speech, was now aboard an Empire transport ship, heading to what the aliens thought was a prison world. But Mary knew the truth. She was going to coordinate rebel activities from inside the Empire's own prison system. "The integration is proceeding as planned," she transmitted on a hidden frequency to Earth. "I'll be in position to organize the prison uprisings within the week." Back on his flagship, Harold Vex finally received the report that shattered his understanding of the situation. His intelligence officer delivered news that made no sense according to everything the Empire believed about conquered species. "Sir, we've traced the source of the rebel intelligence," the officer said with a trembling voice. "It's coming from Earth." "That's impossible," Vex replied. "Earth surrendered. We watched their leaders submit to Empire authority." "Yes, sir, but our analysis shows that their surrender ceremony contained encoded data. Technical specifications, tactical information, supply schedules, everything the rebels are using against us was broadcast during what we thought was their capitulation." For the first time in his career, Harold Vex felt fear. "Are you telling me the humans were never defeated?" "No, sir," the officer replied. "They were never even trying to win a military victory. They were using their conquest as a propaganda platform to communicate with our enemies across the galaxy." The full scope of humanity's deception finally became clear to Vex. Earth hadn't surrendered to save themselves. They had surrendered to save the galaxy. Captain Dan Kelly transmitted the final message from Earth to the Empire's flagship. His words were broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring every being in the galaxy would hear humanity's true intentions. "This is Earth's only warning to the Galactic Empire, and any who would follow in their path," Dan said, his voice carrying across space. "We are humanity. We do not bow to tyrants. We do not accept chains. We may not always win our battles, but we will make sure you lose everything in the process." He paused, letting his words sink in across the galaxy before continuing. "You came to conquer one world and gained nothing but enemies on 1,000 others. You thought defeating us would demonstrate your power, but instead you've shown the galaxy that even the mighty Empire can be brought low by beings who refuse to accept the impossible." Harold Vex listened to the message with growing horror as he realized the true cost of Earth's conquest. "Remember us," Dan concluded, "and choose your next victims more carefully, because somewhere in the galaxy there will always be those who value freedom more than life, and who will burn the universe down rather than accept your chains." The Empire would indeed remember Earth, but not as another conquered trophy. They would remember it as the world that taught the galaxy how to fight back, and how one species' defiance could topple an empire that had ruled for thousands of years.